A brief history of the Antweights. I'm Mark Smith from Robotics.
Hi, I'm Anthony from Team Penny.
And I couldn't ask for a better person to join me on today's podcast because this guy knows a lot more about Antweights than pretty much nearly everyone else I know. So it's good to have you aboard, Anthony.
Thank you so much.
That's all right. So, this is going to be a little talk about the last quarter of a century or so when the Antweight robot class, because of course Robot Wars has different weight classes like boxing, so you had the heavyweights and lightweights, middleweights, featherweights that all appeared in the first couple of series. But then in Robot Wars Extreme 1, we were introduced to a new class called the Antweights class.
We will also be hearing from several other people who have contributed to Antweight robot combat in various different ways over the years and what they have to say.
Yes, so I believe before the Extreme Wars that there was the first appearance of an Antweight that a fan had brought in, and it actually caused interference with the heavyweights. So they had to stop filming for that first session. So that's the first time anyone really heard of an Antweight. I don't know if that made Robot Wars go, oh, let's make a whole series about them. Could have been. Could influence
well, from
them.
what I read up and everything, they planned to do an Antweight tournament for Robot Wars Series 3, which was filmed in 1999, but they ended up cancelling it with the super heavyweight event and a couple of other things due to reasons. And they ended up showing Tyrant, which was one of the planned competitors for it, during Heat M of Series 3, where I think the producers wanted to hype things up a bit to make it look like there was some skullduggery going on and everything.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just for drama's sake. And of course, it turned out a kid in the audience had his robot with him and the transmitter, and there was no foul play or anything. He just had the stuff with him, and at a time after the event thing was cancelled, and he brought it into the crowd with him. But it was pretty cute of Philippa Forrester then taking the little robot and putting it next to Sir Kill-A-Lot for size comparison. They didn't actually refer to them as Antweights back then. It wasn't until Robot Wars Extreme Series 1 where it really came into its own, of course.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I remember, like when I first seen it for the first time, I was like, oh my god, you don't have to spend loads of money on a heavyweight. You can actually build it with small components and make your own, and which is an Antweight. And the wonderful thing about it is, like in the Antweight class at the very beginning of this, you had teams like Team Razor, Behemoth, the future Apollo stars as well, even Craig Danby as well. And you're like, it's really cool to see where their origin started off, which was with Antweights. Like many teams out there, even nowadays, everyone who I know has started off with an Antweight and have moved up the weight classes.
Mm-hmm. Of course, one of the main draws of this, aside from the fact that they're a lot more compact, they're also a lot cheaper to build. That was what was mentioned in the Robot Wars Extreme Robot Guide.
Yeah, they are. That's the thing too. It's according to what components you put into it. Now, if you want something like the basic wedge, like a lot of people would start off with, that's the cheaper option. It starts to get a wee bit more expensive when you start adding weapons and stuff to it, but that's when you get more experience with the building side of things.
Yes, definitely. I mean, first robot that I built was a pusher, of course, as is the case with most people. Then I moved on to flippers, and then lifters, and eventually then moved on to the spinners. And then last year I ended up, earlier this year, I managed to get my first ever grab and lift mech working, which was quite a fun thing to do. So it's all about, it's a great place to start with experimenting designs without breaking the bank, as Noel Sharkey put it in the Revived Robot Wars when they did a wee segment on the Antweights.
Yeah, that's the part that really makes me happy with the Noel Sharkey segment, because before that segment, he was actually over at our pit table, and I had my Antweights out there. So the Antweights I brought to Series 10 of Robot Wars was Mini, Dan, Tom Kia, Smidsy, and Rusty. And Noel Sharkey had seen them and was like, "Oh my god, these are the smaller weight class." And he goes, "Yes, these are Antweights." So I handed him the controller to Rusty, and he was driving it around the floor. He self-righted it. He was like, "This is so like." They're really good responsives and stuff. And he goes, "Well, thank you so much, because this is the very first time I've ever drove an Antweight before." I've never had an opportunity like this. So it was a kind of a great honor to someone I grew up watching on Robot Wars, like the head judge. They got his first fray into Antweights, and then after that, the segment with Alex Shakespeare and talking about the Antweights and stuff. I thought to myself, that's quite nice. I like the fact that they got to be shown in the reboot, because in the reboot it was very hyper focused on the heavyweights, so it was a proud moment to see that the Antweights got a little bit of time in that segment.
Yeah. And for those of you who are wondering, Anthony was part of the Push to Exit team, captained by Shane Swan in Robot Wars Series 10, and his robot Rusty could be seen sat on top of the robot in several pit segments. But yes, it was good that this weight class was acknowledged, because along with the featherweights, it's the only weight class that really endured after the end of the classic series of Robot Wars back in 2004.
Yes, that's the sad part when the series was cancelled. That a lot of these teams have all these robots. Most of them had featherweights and heavyweights. So it was kind of a bit of a role reverse for most of those teams, because they reverted back down to Antweight. But it also showed that's the wonderful thing about the very beginning of I would call that the Antweight World Series. That you could see all these great ideas that they had and implemented into Antweight form, and then new teams showing up who then made a name for themselves now in this generation of combat robotics. But there's certain robots that back in the day that I enjoyed watching, especially now you can still watch there's I can't remember exactly the channel's name, but they've done an archive of the very beginning, the first couple of Antweight World Series tournaments.
Robot Wars 101, I think it is.
That's in there. The thing that I love about it's the show, nostalgic part of it, right? Because we're used to the very high end arenas that are nowadays that are for spinners and different types of robots.
It wasn't like that, was it?
No, it wasn't, because the thing about with Antweights back then, the normal traditional ones that we use now is N20s for drive, high powered servos for flippers, and we've got the Bristol Bot Builder ESCs that are help a hell of a lot for the UK division. But way back in the day, they use servos, 360-degree servos for the drive, servos for the whatever weapon they had, and big NiCad batteries.
They had to hack the servos, didn't they? Because servos typically don't go 360 degrees.
No, so they had to do a lot of fiddling around just to get it to drive like a normal combat robot, which is very ingenious for the time.
They were very slow as well, of course, but it was Genesis. That's the thing. That's how it all starts. You've got to start somewhere. And even in the days before the microgear N20 motor came along, which presumably was not for at least another decade, a lot of them did start very slow, but then some of them were actually quite nippy, as we saw in the Robot Wars Extreme event in 2001. But before we get to that, I think we should go back to where it all began. So, Antweight World Series 1 was hosted by Oliver Steeples, who you might have known as the builder of the Robot Wars Robots Cunning Plan and Griffin in earlier seasons. Now, he was based in Reading, and he took a great interest in the Antweights to the point where he staged his own private event at his own house on 26th of September 1999. The idea behind it was just as a little get-together with friends. There was a field of 6 competitors, and it was just done for a bit of fun. So the name was tongue-in-cheek. It was a bit of a joke. If only they knew. But the video footage for the first ever Antweight World Series can be found on YouTube on Robot Wars 101's channel. And it really is a classic case of early installment weirdness, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, what do we do? As you're absolutely right, it wasn't super planned out, okay, this is what we're going to do, like the way Antweight events are nowadays. It was more just a load of friends get together and have a bit of fun. But that's the thing that I love about the nostalgic side of things. It's I love looking back at older events, because it also inspires me with new ideas and ways of doing things. But I do love the fact it's basically a table, and the whole premise is to push the robot off the edge.
they were so slow and everything, so fights would not be over in a split second anyway. But the
No.
interesting thing, there were two arenas. There was one that was basically a table, and the other one was a table with a bunch of wooden blocks and obstacles on top of it, which made things a bit more interesting. And one of the competitors was a walker, which is pretty cool, because even back then, people were thinking quite far ahead. And the inaugural Antweight World Series champion, Odyssey, is a robot that certainly lived up to its name, I suppose.
Yeah, like that's the wonderful thing when you're speaking about walkers and that, like the see that so far, even all the way back then, that the robot combat, especially, it really wants to have walkers. Like BattleBots have wanted walkers for many years now, and there's some like through the walker designs, I'd say the next evolution to that would be shufflers. I've seen a lot of that now over in like I've never actually seen how the mechanisms work, but it's very fascinating to see that there's like shuffle bots now.
Yeah, the walker that appeared at this event was called Type Zero or Type O, and it was a bit like Scuttle from Techno Games. Or if we're
Yes.
looking at heavyweight robots, well, it's Big Brother Anarchy, with the 8 legs and sort of with the camshaft set up scuttling. It was very slow though, but it was still pretty cool to see something like this as far back as 1999 in such a small weight class. And incidentally, Odyssey, which was Oliver Steeples built, by the way, normally it was a wheeled robot for most of its time, but in the first Antweight World Series, it actually had tracks and had some Lego parts on board it as well.
That's a wonderful thing about Lego as well, that integrated into the Antweights as well, is a lot of people used like Lego parts, like tracks and the wheels. Also, a lot of still to this day, I would use them as well. The wheels, the rubber tires, and that for the Antweights.
The first ever Antweight robot was Toe Cutter, built by Adam Clark in 1998. Oliver Steeples tells us about how the scene was set for Antweight robot combat in 1999.
My name's Oliver Steeples, and I built Cunning Plan for Series 1 and Griffin for Series 2 and 3. During Series 2, I spoke to another builder, Adam Clark, and he came up with the idea of an Antweight robot, which was 100 grams and would fit in a 4-inch cube. I really like the idea of this, but 100 grams isn't a lot to work with, and at the time, like micro servos, micro receivers were stupidly expensive, so we increased the weight to 150 grams. So I built 2 robots, Odyssey and Argo, and then Pete Collier made a few, and we had the first, what I called AWS Antweight World Series in my living room in Reading, and it's sort of amazing where Antweight World Series, weirdly named AWS, is now.
Because when I made little Lego robots for myself at home back in the late 90s, when I was bitten by the Robot Wars bug, I thought these would be great wheels if the robots were only this small. And there you go. One thing I also noticed on the original Odyssey design was that the batteries for the robot, which are stuck on the back, are exposed to the world. Basically, you would not get that. You would not get that today. Obviously, the safety rules have changed quite a lot. They evolved very quickly, as it turns out, because only the first 2 Antweight World Series events were held at Oliver's house. It was starting with Antweight World Series 3, where they would host it at Guildford University. So this was the first time it was hosted like as a proper event with its own poster, Antweight World Series 3. And that was held on October 22nd, 2000. There were 15 entries for this one. Unfortunately, no footage for this exists, but it was the first time the number of competitors exceeded 6 robots. And things evolved pretty quickly because in February 2001, at the Antweight World Series 4, there were 27 entries, and it was the first time they had used protective panels around the arena at this point because they were really starting to get more destructive much more quickly.
Yes, this is the first time that DC motors were used for the weapon motors. Now, I've done that as well with machines like Topbot because I didn't want to put a brushless motor onto it. I wanted to see what would be the equivalent of it. And talking to Craig Danby, he had said that back in the day we used to use them as weapon motors, and they're still very good, very effective. And I didn't really know if that was going to be like, I don't believe they're going to be that powerful. I did wire it up and done a couple of tests, and yeah, it did some real damage. So it's kind of fascinating the fact that before brushless motors were introduced into the Antweights, they were just normal DC motors you would get out of RC cars. So it's very good engineering ways.
You work with what you've got at the time, of course, and the technology that's available. But speaking of Craig Danby, he was actually the winner of Antweight World Series 4 with Anto, and he also won Antweight World Series 6 with the same robot. And Antweight World Series 6 was also the first of the Antweight World Series events to have a fully enclosed arena this time, which is obviously for the best interest of safety, and that's the gold standard we've held to this day. But speaking of Anto, of course, that was one of the competitors in Robot Wars Extreme 1. And this is interesting because there have been a few Antweight World Series events at this point, like 4 or 5 of them. So in Robot Wars Extreme 1, this was the first time it was actually broadcast to the masses and introduced a lot of people to this new weight class. So we had quite a small field. You had robots such as Pants, Combatant. Well, Pants was built by Peter Collier, who had previously entered with robots like Pandemonium. You had Combatant, Peter Waller's machine, and he's quite a veteran with the Ants, of course. Anti-B, built by Anthony Pritchard. Razzler, which was a modified Razor toy, built by Ian Lewis. Who else did we have? We had Legion, an Antweight cluster bot. Now that was amazing for the time because the weight limit was so tight with the technology we had that the robot had no armor whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool to see the first cluster bot in it. I know that there's not a lot of teams that go cluster bots, but they are fun. If you can control, if you've got a good rapport with your partner, you can really be a nuisance bot. But it's cool to see that that's the very first cluster bot, and it inspired me to. I haven't done it yet, but I've always wanted to do a cluster bot.
Clusterbot was fun. I built a Fleaweight robot recently, and I thought it'd be pretty cool to do a clusterbot sometime. But at the moment, I can only manage a Fleaweight size pusher because, well, it's just stuff's just so small, and getting the batteries small enough and everything's a bit tricky. But Fleaweight, for those who are wondering, is like a smaller weight class than Antweight that's usually been used as a sideshow at Antweight events where the weight limit is just 75 grams, and Antweight is 150. And I actually came second in a Fleaweight sideshow in Antweight World Series 62 with the Vega. But the fields were getting a lot smaller back then. And, well, of course, you can get even smaller than that. You could get Nanoweight, which is only 25 grams. And the Bristol Bot Builders people definitely were having quite a ball with that weight class for a little while back in the late 2010s.
It's crazy when you think about, like, the standard one is 150 grams, and then someone comes along with a new weight class, and you're like, oh no, I have to relearn how to to get into this weight class.
The problem is these much smaller weight classes, which were just for sideshows at Antweight World Series events, were just a bit too small and fiddly, and that's why they've kind of fallen out of favour again, which is an interesting thing. But we're kind of going off on a tangent there and everything. We should probably talk about 2 of the most influential robots that appeared in the Robot Wars Extreme Antweight events. One of them, of course, being Combatant, which was the winner of Robot Wars Extreme 1. Peter Waller, a very experienced builder. He's won a few Antweight World Series titles since then. And at Orcs 8, which happened earlier just this year, he won the WARF side tournament, which was quite amazing. So he's still got the chops. He's still got the power. He's still got the skills. He's still got the experience. But back then, this was one of the earliest Antweight spinners, which had a sort of bludgeoning spinner on the back. And, well, as he was saying, it would have used DC motors, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would have used DC motors, but the wonderful thing about Combat Amp back then, it had this milled. I'm gonna guess it's like an RC car wheel, or he literally made it some sort of component he's milled out himself. But the wonderful thing about the weapon itself was the blades that's on the weapon are basically, the wee carving crafting tools. So he's literally just bolted them on for the blades, and that's the wonderful ingenuity. Like, you work with what you have, and it's crazy to think that just those little components made such a devastating spinner. And he's mixed a wonderful thing with the first version of Combat Ant. It's a mixture of a wedge and a weapon, like a devastating weapon. So yeah, I love Combat Ant. I've loved the evolution of Combat Ant. It's not like a lot of teams will do that. Well, they'll stick with one robot and then they'll scrap it and move on to another. He's kept with Combat Ant throughout the years. I know it's evolved to like an undercutter now, but it's still cool that he's still running Combat Ant.
It is really cool. And another thing is that he was really thinking ahead of the time as well, because Combat Ant had these sticky tires to get more traction and everything. So so getting traction on the ground is also a very clever thing too. So Combat Ant in Robot Wars Extreme 1 really was a robot ahead of its time, definitely. And speaking of which, another robot that you could say was arguably ahead of its time was Anti-B, which was the winner of Robot Wars Extreme 2's Antweight event. Now, it's essentially a shrunken down version of Behemoth, Anthony Pritchard's most famous robot, of course. But this one was quite nippy for an Antweight robot back in the day. It had small wheels, not big ones, so you must have had some good drive motors going into that one. And the scoop was pretty potent as well. And it could self-ride pretty well too, so it was pretty amazing just what sort of tech you could fit into that.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about the Behemoth team's machine, because it used Lego wheels, which is really going full circle to what we were talking about. They are very grippy for the Antweight class. So Anthony was the very first one to use the wheels. And the best part about with Anthony is he's a model maker by trade. So using like small components in that, I think if I'm right, that the scoop for the Antweight was like a titanium. So he was really thinking ahead of his time on that aspect, especially with the servos and that. Like the servo that they used would have been like a very high end. They would have been like airplane servos. So they're very like they have to be very strong to pull the rudders off the planes and that. So to see that he's used components like that in such a small like he still that's a wonderful thing too. He still has his Antweight, which is it's cool that he still has it, because like sadly about with robot combat over time in history, a lot of people scrap their machines, not thinking, oh, these are like icons. So it's kind of nice to know that. As I said, I don't know about the original Combat Amp, but I do know that the original Anti-B is still exists to this day.
It makes me glad that I didn't scrap the shells for my first ever Antweight build, Proxima Centauri, or its running mate Polaris, which was they were both built in 2018, and they were two of the first robots I competed with. And although I had built several different evolutions of Antweight robots since then, many of which have gone to the great robot graveyard in the sky, Polaris and Proxima Centauri Mark 1's chassis, you've now, of course, repurposed them and got them competing in your own events, which we'll be talking about later.
Oh yeah, so that's the same. That's the thing. Like, I'm exactly the same. There's been a few of my very very original Antweights that I regret that I scrapped, because I'm like, I really wish I'd have kept them. The one that's still going to this day is Rusty. So I'm really happy I didn't give up on that machine either. But that's what I mean by at the time of the series being recorded, they're just going as competitors having fun. They don't think about the history, because obviously they never knew how this was going to evolve over time.
So Robot Wars ended not that long after Extreme 2, because there was just Robot Wars Series 7 after that, and in 2004 it was now up to the live events to keep the spirit of the sport going. It was at that point that I kind of lost interest in robot combat, at least for a little while. But the sport carried on, and 10 years later, in the mid-2010s, so we're talking around the year 2014, things had changed quite a lot. It was now around Antweight World Series 46 or thereabouts, 45, 46, and this was quite a difference from where we last left off, because, of course, N20 motors had arrived on the scene. They were much smaller, lighter, much faster than the servos that had come before them and everything. And the winner of Antweight World Series 44 and 45 was a robot called Stanley, which was built by Alex Shakespeare, and he is quite a significant figure in Antweight's scene, as well as Rory Mangles, of course. They were both in Team Nuts, but they were both consummate professionals in the Antweight field in their own right.
Yes, like a lot of teams owe a lot to them because, like, for me, with Alex, that he has team nuts and bolts, a lot of commission builds, and also he has the flippers and rambots, like beginner class for people who are coming into the sport. So it's a wonderful thing too. The same thing with Rory Mangles. He was the one who created the Nano 2 speed controllers that everybody used, including myself when I used to run Spectrum. So the both of them have contributed a hell of a lot to the Antweight scene. A lot of different machines owe their owe their parts to both members.
The Centauri was built with a Nano 2 speed controller when I first built it, and yeah, that was it was very simple and straightforward to work with and everything for a professional idiot like myself who was very new to building robots at that point. I had 20 years of enthusiasm with robots, but when you don't have the skill set and you're just getting into it, it can feel quite daunting. But it's always great when you've got all sorts of different resources where they can make it a lot more simple and straightforward and everything. Alex Shakespeare, he won two events with Stanley, which was a four-wheel drive pusher. Then he won another event with, I can't believe it's not Stanley, which was basically Stanley with a flipper. And yeah, that was an even better machine, and it showed how much he had evolved. If you just look at the pictures on the Antweight World Series wiki, Alex went on to win a couple more after that. Just trying to see which other robots he entered. But yeah, Test Robot Please Ignore, that was another one of his. Big vertical flywheel, a bit like a mini Aftershock, don't you think?
Yeah.
Champion of Antweight World Series 55, and then that was just the event before my first Antweight World Series, which was AWS 56. Yeah, so overall, Alex Shakespeare, I think he won like 4 or 5 Antweight World Series events, which is pretty reasonable, you know. It's and the thing is, it's not just the fact that he won several events himself. A lot of successful competitors entered robots that he built for them as ready-to-run machines, which they then were able to adjust and modify. Kind of like if you buy a car, like a Ford Mustang, and use it as a platform to build upon. So Alex Shakespeare Bot's website, you could buy, back in the late 2010s anyway, and you can still do to this day, I think, you could buy an invertible two-wheel drive pusher, you could buy a robot that had a flipper, the shaky flipper as it was called, that was a very popular one. And there was also the one that had an axe and grabber sort of weapon too. So yeah, and there were good little designs that could be built upon, and
yeah, like exactly the same thing. The very first flipper that I got, was known as Hit, was a shaky flipper. That's the thing about it is, like, everybody who started off in beginners has some. If you talk to anybody, they will say that they've got a part, they've got something from Alex down the line.
Definitely. And then, of course, we ended up getting our first cluster bots winning Antweight World Series 59, which was Yeetus and Retreatus. Haha, Yeman Chad. That's its full name, by the way. Built for Team Azure, by Azure, rather. And yeah, first ever cluster bot to win Antweight World Series. Team Fights Little Sites would repeat that feat a few years later. And there was also RBMK, which was the first, I believe it was the first non-roller to win Antweight World Series, because it was a gyroscopic walker of sorts, which was built by George of Team Zero. He'd also competed with a very successful beater spinner called Valkyrie. But RBMK was the one that won him Antweight World Series 58, which I also competed at. I saw it happen. And it's a really amazing design, really. It's like got these two giant whirling blades on the top and a couple of smaller ones at the front. If you're familiar with American robot combat, they call Antweights ferryweights over there, by the way, and their Antweight class is slightly bigger, of course. They have this beetleweight robot called Droopy, which uses a similar sort of gyroscopic walkabout with its weapons. And yeah, that's going to be very successful.
You see, this is the wonderful thing about different people coming into the sport. It's like, normally a lot of us would go by the basics like wedge or a flipper, but then you get people who come in and have completely think outside of the box and go, right, I'm going to completely throw all of that out the window and make something completely mad, and it shouldn't work, but it actually does. And I'm always fascinated and inspired by that.
when it works, and it works so well and everything, I mean, it's like, if we go back to Shakespeare and Rory Mangle's Nuts in Series 8, well, Robot Wars Series 8, it was seen as a bit of a joke and everything. And similarly in Series 9, when Nuts 2 first appeared, it didn't really get to do much. But in Series 10, it evolved into what they call the lethal joke character, because it was, when it worked with Smelty Brain sort of thing, and it worked so well, even defeating the likes of Carbide, it was just such a defining moment of Austin that even poor Rory himself could not believe it and everything. And he's like, what? Just seeing this sort of thing happen. Like, it worked. It didn't just work. It worked so well, so much better than anybody, not least the builders of it, expected. And it's moments like that which are rare in robot combats, which in any weight class and stuff, that just make you love the sport.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about this sport, is it'll always surprise you. There's never a boring moment in it.
Samuel Grashof of Team Self-Destruct tells us about his experiences of competing in the antweight class and what it means to him.
The antweight class, I feel, is like any other weight class, in that the technology behind it has its own pros and cons. While the microtech can be very fiddly to handle and maintain, its failsafe system is very simple compared to a beta weight that has various parts to its own failsafe. The tech for the antweight is impressive in that even a 150-gram robot could cause serious damage and leave an impact that strikes fear into the hearts of us roboteers. Yet, fear and failure can make for a great motivator. In the 4 years I've built Antweights, I've gained great success within this year alone compared to earlier years prior. We've conquered Bristol and we've conquered Gloucester. We hope to conquer more Antweight events in other locations in the future. The Antech does have its own unique challenges, but it's worth it for the benefits that come with it, such as the sportsmanship, the camaraderie, the bonding, the connecting, the understanding, the knowledge, the education, taking part, getting to have battles with other great roboteers with their Antweights, making a great impact, win or lose, fighting to the end, having great fun, and even, possibly, potentially, eventually, winning.
Another thing to mention is the standard weight limit, of course, for Antweights is 150 grams, but if it's a walker or a non-roller robot, like RBMK was, the weight limit can be up to 225. There was a size limit restriction for many years, starting way back from the earliest days of a 4-inch cube. It didn't matter what way it fitted into the cube, as long as it would fit. But of course, they've kind of phased this size rule out in favour of ones where you just have to start in a square of a certain size. But some robots were designed in such a way that they could fit themselves inside the cube, and then when the fight started, they would literally deploy out into the form that they would fight in. A fair few robots have taken on this sort of form, but I think perhaps the most successful and noteworthy one would be Expandabot, Adam Stanley's flipper robot. So this is one of the most dominant robots that's been around recently, and it starts with its flipper raised up, so it can fit within the cube, and then it drops the flipper at the start of the fight, and then it fights as normal and everything. That's one great noteworthy example. And it's been one of the most successful robots in recent times. It's won Antweight World Series 7 times, which is the joint record holder, along with Anticide and a little bit of Fail, which we'll talk about soon. But it's also it's just a very well-driven machine. And I had the misfortune of facing it in its first ever event when I was fighting against it with Plucky back at Antweight World Series 62. So yeah, Adam Stanley, young guy, really good driver. He's won 8 Antweight World Series events, 7 with that robot, and 1 with Icebreaker Jr., and he's always been seen as one to beat now and everything. Although the winner of the most recent Antweight World Series, as of this recording, is GNC, the first-time winner, which is like a sort of grabber robot and everything, so like a control bot. So it's always good to see somebody finally break someone else's triangle of dominance. But I think there's not been anyone more dominant than Andy Hibbard when it comes to Antweight events, Antweight World Series anyway, because we cannot not talk about Anticide, which is one of the most recognisable and successful Antweight robots that's ever been made. And Andy also competed with a little bit of Fail, which was a drum spinner. But Anticide is one that is really impressive because it was a four-wheel drive flipper bot with a pneumatic flipper.
Yeah, this is the wonderful ingenuity of the team to come up with something like that, because as we all know, the most powerful is a high powered servo. That's what everybody uses. And then literally someone comes along with this idea, and then to see the height, like when Antweight gets underneath anybody, like they're launched into the ceiling. The wonderful thing about that as well is it's not the being flipped up into the air, it's the falling down that does the damage, because obviously that's how most of the battles end, is either an N20 has broke or the impact, because antweights aren't meant to be designed to be fired that high into the air and then plummeting back down to the floor.
I mean, Antweight did not necessarily start off that way. It was the winner of Antweight World Series 14. That was its first event that it won. And the flipper was a bit different, but it had its more familiar design with the pneumatic flipper as early as Antweight World Series 29, going by the wiki, although it was still a two-wheel drive robot at that point, by the look of it. It was like Iron Ore in a way, with the way that it would get underneath things and just fling them up. But another thing that's worth mentioning about Antweight was that it looked like a sort of miniature prototype of quite a familiar, successful heavyweight in Robot War Series 10, called Rapid.
Yes, and I have to say, for seeing Rapid in person up close at Robot Wars, the ingenuity in that machine was unbelievable, and to hear this, the inspiration or the reason why this was created was because of his antweight. Just shows you how much that antweights mean a lot to new future designs.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people think that a beetle weight would be more, or a featherweight would be more effective as a sort of prototype, but, well, Andy managed to pull it off. He managed to pull off an effective heavyweight robot prototype in the Antweight class. And Antweight actually competed as recently as Antweight World Series 72 last year in 2024. So, I mean, it's just one of those legendary robots that's, if there's ever an Antweight Combat Hall of Fame, that one's definitely going to be one of the inaugural ones, and it's also, to date, the only UK Antweight robot to even get an honourable mention in the Combat Robot Hall of Fame in general. You've seen all these big, amazing, legendary robots that get a place in it, or even an honourable mention, and Antweight, as you know, you've done well when your Antweight robot from the UK has managed to get even just an honourable mention there.
Oh yeah, that's always a pride moment.
Most Antweight events in the UK take place in the south of England. Thomas Yao tells us what it meant to him to host the event himself in York.
Hi, my name is Thomas. I'm from Approximation Robotics and I hosted Antweight World Series 66 in York at the start of 2023. I think at the time the majority of combat robot events in the UK were hosted in the south of the country, but in particular this was the case for Antweight events, at least from my experience starting around 2018. There was a push at the time that I hosted for more people to host events in the north. That's why I volunteered to host it. I think the distribution of events was skewed towards the south just due to where the majority of the builders were, being primarily based more in the south. I think in recent years though, we've seen more people from the north compete, and I think that's partly due to the fact that there are more events for them to go to and compete.
Of course, Antweight World Series is the one event series we've been talking about and everything, and it's now had 75 iterations in the last quarter of a century or so. But of course, other events have popped up since then. I mean, not just ones we can compete in, such as SCAR, which was hosted by Gus Collier. That's Steel City Antweight Robotics. I went to SCAR 4 in 2023, and what they did with that was that they abolished the 4-inch cube, and so size restrictions were not really such an issue and everything, as long as you could get it through the door of the arena and within the weight it was fine. But rather than rely on dropping an opponent into the pit as the only means to defeat an opponent, I remember in one event, the one I went to, they had these rotating screws like what you get in BattleBots that could pluck a robot up into the air and over the arena wall, and that happened to me a couple of times.
Yeah, it's good to see different events try to do different things, like have arena hazards and stuff, because traditionally with that we had arenas, there's the pit area or a void area, and sometimes there's two on in an arena, but it's kind of cool to see something electronic in it, like it's a proper hazard. Do not go near it. It'll help the opponent, but it'll do damage to you.
And then there was Orcs, which is based in Oxford. That's hosted by Dave Weston. And, well, if you know your stuff, he was one of the members of the Crackers and Smash team back in the days of Revive Robot Wars. And now he is well known for his Beetleweights, such as Seventh Circle Lilith. But Orcs is an event I went to earlier this year for Orcs 8. And I like the fact that at each of the Orcs events, after the main competition, they have a side competition with completely different sort of arena setup. So they had things like a pinball tournament for one event. For the one I went to, it was called Warfare, where they had this big, bumpy, sort of mountainous sort of terrain, which was quite fun. I came joint third in that one. And then there was, most recently, they did one that was like a figure-8 racetrack. So it's really cool how they're doing things a bit different as well.
Well, with Orcs, we decided we wanted to maximise the amount of stick time that people got. And that's why we did a fight night format with 5 fights each. But, not everyone was going to do very well in the competition, but we didn't want them to just sit idly by and not have a chance to win something. So we thought, okay, let's give them something more fun to do. So I always like doing the games events at other things that I've done, and so we just started doing them as the side event for Orcs. It's like we wanted to give people a different challenge as well, because combat is combat, but robots aren't always going to be focused towards a particular game. So it's also testing out versatility and what people can do with the challenges, and that's probably going to help them in combat, to be fair. We're doing the Gauntlet at the end of the year, which I'm very much looking forward to. It's obviously based on the Series 1 and 2 game, more towards Series 2, and so obviously they'll have to get from one end to the other within a minute and dealing with all the house robots and the hazards and such. So yeah, that's going to be a real challenge for folks. Look forward to seeing what happens with it.
It's cool to see that the influences of Robot Wars still continue in modern combat. Like, you've got the trials of Series 1 and Series 2, but it's nice that people are continuing on the trials in the weight class, because like I remember one at Robo Nerd. There was like they'd done like a whole miniature version of the trials, so it's kind of nice to see that it's not forgotten. It's been implemented and inspired in the Antweight scene.
In RoboNerd 2023, which was the most recent one, they had robotic soccer of not just the Beetleweights. There was also an arena for Antweights to do that in as well. And I've taken part in a few other little sort of side competitions. Like RoboNerd 2022, Alpha Centauri came second place in this Nuts tournament, which is where you drove, like 4 robots drive out into the center of the arena where these plastic nuts are basically kept. So you have to try and push them back into your own corner and try and push them out of your opponent's corners. So that was quite a fun little thing to do, and definitely more accessible than what you would get in the heavier weight classes.
Yeah, that's the thing that I like, that a lot of these event organizers still carry on their tradition. We're all fans of Robot Wars, and we've all been inspired in some shape or form, but it's nice that they've put them into the different arenas.
Now, of course, it's not just live events that are in competitions where the Antweight class thrives. Quite a few people have been doing their own little robot combat shows at home and filming them and putting them on YouTube. For example, my friend Ross McKay, he's got Robot Carnage, which is his own little robot series. But I think the one, well, not necessarily the one that really started it all, but the one that definitely caught on first was one of your ones, Anthony.
Yes, this is my claim to fame, if that makes sense. So you have to remember that when this all first happened, so Robot Wars had just unfortunately had been cancelled again, the reboot version, and there wasn't really anything out there for, I would say, the regular fan who doesn't know about the Antweight World Series or local events. They primarily just watched it on TV. And around about this time, in about 2017, there's other stuff on YouTube now at the time. So the most popular thing on YouTube at that time was like cardboard Robot Wars tournaments. So the likes of Grand Slam and other types of events like that. And I kind of was sitting looking at them and I enjoyed them, but I was always like, I really would love to see like an RC version of this. And I happened to come across Team Lightning's one. It's kind of like the mixture of cardboard and RC, which they called it Robot Mini Wars.
It's interesting that because back in 2001 and 2002, I built robots out of cardboard and I filmed my little tournaments of those happening. But unfortunately, I don't have the footage anymore. But obviously, that was a different thing, of course, and everything. And like you were saying, these were radio controlled and everything. And it was 2018, so YouTube was very much a thing where people were getting to grips with knowing how to film these things like professionals. And it was also conveniently at the same time that we got the Hexbug toys coming out as well.
Yes, so when I was watching this, the series, so the series that Team Lightning had created was called Robot Mini Wars. They filmed that in 2014, and I was heavily inspired by that. But at the time, in 2017, YouTube used to have this feature known as you could directly message a page, and I'm very heavily when I do this, is I don't want to take someone else's content without permission or ask, could I use some of their content? And I happened to talk to Team Lightning about, you stopped your series. Would you mind if I could continue it on or be inspired and take some stuff from it? So both of us got talking and he sent me all his templates to make cardboard models. So that was the first series that I created, which was Robot Mini Wars. Then the Hexbugs came out, and the next series that I created was Antweight Battle Anarchy. So this was the first time that everything was RC, and we were still testing stuff out. We had a small arena, wasn't that big. It was filmed on my bedroom, in the bedroom.
Or Antweight Anarchy proper, of course. This was like a prototype.
Yeah. So this was the prototype version of it, and then through that we were talking about, we'll let's do a pilot episode and just test out. Now we've got full Antweights now, and we've got Hexbug mods, which is kind of a fun thing too, because before the mods became a thing, before I would say that the godfather of Kip Bash Hexbugs in the form of Orange Juice Overjuice and Paul, we were messing around with bits and pieces, and I had a few N20s, and I thought, you know what, I'll add them to the Hexbugs and see if I give more power, which they did. So the first conversion of that was Airstrike, which is a competitor in the first Antweight Anarchy. So we did the pilot with a Hexbug modded version of Deator, my Antweight, Dan Tomkea, Rusty, and Smidsy. That was the pilot episode, just to see would there be an audience before we invest any time in this. And it got a massive flood of people going, oh my God, we want more of this. Because you have to remember, Robot Wars had just been ended. A lot of people were starved for robot combat. As I said, the average day fan who doesn't know about the Antweights or the live events and that, and are primarily just watch Robot Wars, have now got this little show that like they want more of it. So that's when we invested time to make a proper arena, get proper cameras, do a couple of editing skills. Like if I'm being totally honest with you, we watched a lot of Robot Wars to see, okay, there's that camera angle. There's a camera angle specifically for the pit. There's a camera angle for that. Now the thing with the first series of Antweight Anarchy, we didn't have a floor flipper. We literally had the pit and that was it. And it was there was 18 competitors in it, so I built all of the competitors bar 3. So 2 of them was all 3 of the robots was, and it's bringing back to Alex Shakespeare, because when I had got Rusty, he used to do commissions before he stopped and went on to just having the regular kits, which then became the shaky flippers and stuff like that. So 2 of those, all 3 of those machines, which is in the form of Rusty, Smidsy, and Hit, were shaky customs. So they're the only Antweights that I hadn't had anything to do bar repair them. The rest of the competitors in Series 1 were all built by me, but they had various forms of, some worked and some didn't, because it's the very beginning of doing this. It's the very first fray of me properly building these and getting to understand them. So the one that everyone jokes about at the time was Airstrike. It's like, oh, Airstrike should why is the flipper not working? Now, the components in Airstrike were a mix of a Tombstone ESC with N20s and a Witch Doctor it had a DC motor that had the weapon motor, so when you fired it, a little stick was meant to lift it up.
It's kind of like a Frankenstein's monster then of a robot.
Yeah, and it kept failing every time, to the point that I got fed up and was like, just record it. If the fans are gonna go, if the fans complain about it, it is what it is. It's gonna hold up filming. So that was the best part of it, and then I came up with the creation, and I'm proud that I did that, because at the time of this was a lot of Robot Wars content creators were starting to really show themselves off in the community, and I wanted to show to new audiences, show them off, and actually go like, look, there's so much more out there, and I created Battle of the YouTubers. So we had a good fray of different people in the community all coming together to do like a big like Robot Wars special, and then
We had like Gingermatic, we had Orange Dose Overjuice, of course. Met them both at and quite a few others at RoboNerd as well, actually, which was really cool. Who else did we have in?
We had Sam Elliott, Mr. Psycho, and Owen Radcliffe, which was Tanty Jester at the time. So there was a good fray of these were the big names in the community at the time. I know there's other content creators out there, but at the time these are the ones that I watched on a regular basis, and I thought, you know what, it'd be nice to ask them to come along and do it. And through that,
the cancellation of Robot Wars in a way did the community a favour, because it gave a lot of people a real kick up the pants to then up their own game and start doing their own content and everything, and thus make it more accessible to the masses in a way as a result.
Yeah, and then through doing the special, another idea that came to mind was Battle of the Builders. Now, the original idea for Battle of the Builders was me talking to Roboteers and asking them to come on, but this is very early days of friendships with a lot of the teams.
Yeah.
But the next person that came to mind straight away was Orange Dose Overjuice Paul, because he was really good at doing Hexbug mods. This is at the very beginning of Hexbug mods. I built Hexbug mods, but I didn't actually do any filming about it, because I wasn't really the type person to go, hey, I'm going to show you step by step. I just enjoyed building, so I never made any tutorials and that. But I thought I'll ask him and see what he says. He said yes to it, and we got like 3 seasons out of it. We had unfortunately, one of the Battle of the Builders, he wasn't able to film it, but we got Tanty Jester to come in to do the second one. And then the third one is by far my favourite, because both of us actually had put so much of our time and skills into it that I think that one was the best one, because the one fight that comes to mind, it's always my all-time favourite, even to the fans as well, is Aftershock versus Top Bot.
Yeah.
Because we pushed those to the hilt. This is before, nowadays, now in 2025, we discovered that you could run S1 or S1 lipos on those speed controllers. If we had have known that all the way back in 2019, that we could have done that, you could imagine how powerful they could have been. Now, all of those components use DC motors, like the original robots in the Antweight World Series back in the day. But what we used was 3D printed discs. This is when 3D printing really started to become a thing as well. And it's kind of, when I think about it, my time doing this, as being an event organizer, being a producer of a series like this, it's the evolution in that small space of time. So from 2018 to 2022, I've seen basically the entire evolution of the Antweights. Because when I first started out, you have to remember, the only speed controllers that were available was Rory Mangle's Nano 2s. We didn't have Bristol Bot Builders or a website dedicated to Pacific Antweights. You had to go around sourcing it. A lot of the parts that I got was from Chinese RC cars and companies.
We did have gas micro speed controllers for a while. I learned how to wire them up, but they were always a bit hit and miss, I remember.
Yeah, and then around about 2019, that's when 3D printers and CAD files and stuff.
It's an absolute game changer because previously, of course, you could make a chassis by getting a bit of aluminium, cutting it up, and then bending it into shape. Polycarbonate, you could cut with scissors and then bolt them together with screws and everything. And even in the earliest days, you could use cardboard or Lego parts. But 3D printing, which came around in the last decade, in the late 2010s, that changed everything.
Yeah, that was a big thing. So in 2019, we had a few people come and reach out to us. So the first person that reached out to us was Alexander Day, and he is the one who created all of the Hexbug discs that you see, the gigabyte and megabyte shells. You see a lot of the shows out there on YouTube now owe a lot to that gentleman. But his very first foray into this was coming to us and asking could it help out and stuff. And that's when we got like the top bot disc, the aftershock disc. All of those were 3D printed and made by him, which really elevated the fights for Antweight Anarchy. And as I say, like the evolution came in. The biggest thing that happened eventually in Antweight Anarchy, teams actually wanted to come along. So the transition from series 2 to 3, I kind of like, yes, I was at the forefront still repairing and building machines, but it took the stress off me when proper teams came to enter, like yourself, Jungle Man, uh, Team Draxus, Team Regicide had made Bucky, and and so many different teams have come in. Even Paul and all of those people have come in and helped out. And that's the one thing I really love. It was a real community together, and the whole premise with Outward Anarchy. That's what I was wanting to do, was to show people, hey, these aren't complicated or expensive. You don't have to be an engineer to do this. You can literally build this anywhere. And the biggest inspiration, the biggest moment for me, the emotional moment for me, is going to RoboNerd to RoboNerd, my first RoboNerd, and a kid came up to me and was like all shock and awe. I was like, I'm a massive fan of Antweight Anarchy. I'm here for the very first time. I was inspired by Antweight Anarchy. I've built my first Antweight and I'm about to go into the arena and fight it. Thank you so much.
People knew you from part of the Push to Exit team as a supporting member, and then you go out and do your own thing, and it really is so life affirming. Is it life affirming? Is that the term to use then?
It's kind of surreal. So for me, I'm just like an average Joe. I love Combat Robot, and you hear these things where people go like, "Oh, a bit of fame," they start turning into this arrogant, "I'm better than everybody else." But no matter what, throughout my entire YouTube career, I've just been, I'm doing this for fun. You're coming along on this journey with me. I never really seen it as a Robot Wars show or something that would inspire people. It was just something for fun. But when there's so many teams have come up to me, and so many like fans have come up to me going like, "You were our Robot Wars when there was no Robot Wars," and I was like, so surreal. It's kind of an out of body experience when people talk about it.
It was really affirming for me anyway to be getting the pleasure to take part in the Antweight Anarchy Special International Inferno. This was the first one where they had the floor flipper in the arena, I think. And also, yeah. You said that the best Antweight Anarchy fight ever was the one with Topbot versus, what was it called?
Topbot versus Aftershock.
Yes, I had the pleasure of being part of the second most popular Antweight Anarchy fight, which was Polaris versus Nexus, in the final of the International Inferno episode, where Polaris lasted almost the full distance before eventually going over the arena fence. But that was such an amazing experience, actually getting to see the arena itself and everything, and the way the cameras were all set up. I remember we actually filmed it outside.
Yeah, so you kind of landed in a very perfect time. So there was two arenas. So the V1 arena was from 2018 to the two specials, which was Battle of the Builders and Battle of the YouTubers and Battle of the Builders. But it was starting to wear down. Fans were starting to ask for like, "Oh, can we have house robots? Can we have flippers? What's going to happen?" So we completely redesigned it and rebuilt it. I got a whole new floor, which was a custom-made floor. We didn't use the Robot Wars logo. We made our own logo. So it was completely, this is the first official time this is Antweight Anarchy. And we were kind of hemming and hawing of what special we were going to do. And I kind of thought like, the Commonwealth Challenge type thing. It'd be nice to have different robots representing different places. And around about this time is when me and you were communicating with each other. I had showed you how the internals of Rusty because you were interested in wanting to build your own, and you went off and did your own thing, and eventually came back and was like, "I've created this. I've Polaris. You were inspired by Push to Exit, if if I'm right, and you wanted you were going to your first Antweight event, and I kind of thought myself, if they managed to survive, I'd love them to come over here to represent Scotland because it meant that we would have a representative. Now we had obviously a representative from Wales. We had Tanta Jester with Jester and that. But we didn't want it to be all Irish robots. We wanted different representatives. So like we had Tough as Nails and stuff like that. But you're absolutely right. That last fight was so intense. But the reason why we took it outside is we were still getting used to like recording production wise, and we didn't realize that the lights that we use, these are big high powered lights. They're like what we use for in studio light, but they interfere with the infrared on the Hexbug mods. So the idea was take it outside so we don't have the infrared problem, because that's what was causing robots to stop and die, and later down the line fans would criticize it by going like, oh, these are really bad fights, the robots not working. It was all because of the infrared problem. We managed to sort that out for series 3 and 2. But this was like the very beginning. So you were in the brand new arena. We had never tested the 4-flipper. We also had the house robots for the first time as well. So, well, we say house robots, we had Matilda. But it was such a great battle, because there's one moment that still shocks me to this day, is when Nexus fired Polaris through the arena wall doors, the roof part, or the side part. Now that was meant to have polycarb, we run out of time, but it went in and then came. The flipper actually saved it and pulled it back in again and continued that fight. And if Nexus hadn't have fired you out, I would have hated to be the judge to go back and forth. Now, now saying that, the way that we do the rules, that's what people were confused about. The way that I do the rules for Antweight Anarchy and now our new show, Mecha Mayhem, we count flips. So it's like how many times a robot can get underneath. So that robot got 16 flips over. This robot only got 3 to make it fair. But we still go by different, like the sort of the same rule set as Robot Wars and the live events, but we always put a little. We count the flips more as with aggression points and that. But it was such a great fight. Like, as I say, that's in my top 10 favorite battles. Like, as I said, the one that people remember is Aftershock and Top Hat. But the second one that everyone talks about is Nexus and Polaris, and still to this day people talk about it.
Who'd have thought that we'd be making history? It's quite amazing. I mean,
it's crazy.
If we come to judges, I think Nexus would have deserved the win. It got a lot more flips in, and I just didn't have the power to get underneath him and flip him over. But it's not just about flipping him over. There are other ways to win. You can win by surviving and outwitting your opponent, which happens in all sorts of live events to this day. But yeah, by the time you got to 3, the production value of Antweight Anarchy had gone through the roof. But of course, everything has its shelf life and does kind of come to an end. So what happened after that then?
So basically what happened was that this is kind of a story that people don't know about, that I created Mecha Mayhem in 2019. So the original plan was to run the sister show and Antweight Anarchy at the same time. So the crew was going to be split. One would still continue recording Antweight Anarchy on YouTube, and Mecha Mayhem would become the Antweight live event series, where, like, say, new teams would come along, they get a test, they get to test the robot. If they're qualified enough and they do good, they'll then get on to Antweight Anarchy. That was what the goal was with Mecha Mayhem. But obviously, what obviously happened was COVID had happened, so that kind of set Mecha Mayhem back on the back burner. So all of the resources that were going to go into get Mecha Mayhem up and running went into Series 3, which caused basically more high production. So more time went into building the arena, getting it more stronger. We got money to make a big That's the thing you can't see on the show, because we have the cameras in the arena. It's the polycarb box that we have around the arena. So we had the same grade of polycarb that you'd have on the Antweight World Series and on all Antweight events. So then we were confident enough going, right, well, we have literally a bulletproof box, a lot bigger than anything else. It actually it fully protects the person. So why don't we start getting spinners? So one of the teams that I asked and was a massive help through Antweight Anarchy was Team ULL. Tom now has been quite famous, as I call him, the tombstone of of the UK with Baby Deadbod.
Baby Deadbod, one of those robots. I like to joke, my robot is practically indestructible, and the only thing that can destroy it is Baby Deadbod, which
yeah. So the thing with him, he had, at the time of that, he was in the middle of making like an Antweight version of Baby Deadbot, but just didn't have it in time. But he came up with another robot called WTF Bot. So we were kind of going to ourselves, we've never had an undercutter like a proper spinner. So I asked to have WTF Bot for Series 3. So then I was constantly asked by the crew, I was constantly asked by teams, come on, let's have spinners, let's have spinners. And it's like, right, okay. And I made it at that point, it was like, if the arena gets completed, this could be the last like series, because I wanted to move on to do live events to inspire new teams, because a lot of teams would ask about Outlander going like, why is there no live event version of it? And it's like, it's very hard to run a show for YouTube, and then you have trying to use your resources to do a live event at the same time. It's a lot. So that's what I mean. Like the plan was in 2019, the crew would have been split in half. One would primarily run Antweight Anarchy, and I would run Mecha Mayhem. But they would still be joined together. It would be basically trials. Basically, if they make it through Mecha Mayhem, they go on to Antweight Anarchy then. But it was starting to the arena was starting to show its age. Like you have to remember there's it's not like the Antweight events where they have like a 2-day event and then they take a break and repair the arena for the next event.
And I should stress here that in any full combat Antweight tournament, the arena floor usually only is good for that one tournament. And by the time you even get to the end of the tournament, the floor is a foobar, basically.
Yeah. So you have to remember, we had the V2 arena was used from the moment from International Inferno 1 all the way up to Series 3. It was like there was little upgrades done, like the floor flipper was repaired and was more powerful. The pit device could be activated quicker. It wasn't like a delayed problem, because we were having problems with Topbot kept bending the bar every time it hit the pit release, so they had to repair that multiple times. So things were getting repaired, but you're absolutely right. The shelf right now. The biggest reason why I ended Antweight Anarchy was we were the lightning in the bottle at the moment. We were the pioneers of that type of genre of events, and then you had other shows come along in the form of like Chicken Strip Robotics, Chaos Robotics. You had like there was the same formula, but they were doing a lot better. And I was like, it's kind of like that old boxer. It's like, do I still want to be in the ring, and let the next generation go ahead and do it? And I could see the tide changing, and I thought, yeah, I think it's. I don't want to be continuing this on to like we're like grey-haired old men trying this arena's falling apart. It's like,
I tell you what, 3 is a nice round number.
Yeah, well, if you think about it too, it's like we had 3 seasons and a multitude of specials. So we did a lot. We did a lot in the 5 years that we run the show. So
it lasted longer than the Robot Wars revival did.
So at that point, all bets were off. I was like, right, that's pot spinners into it. Like we're not coming back for. There was an idea of making Series 4. They were twisting my arm to do it. And I was like, right, if we're gonna go Series 4, it's gonna be pure battle bots. It's gonna be all spinners, unless there's like a couple of robots that can survive against spinners. that might be different, that was going to become battle bots for the last series. I'm kind of happy that didn't happen.
A pair of mini kill saws coming up from the arena floor.
Oh, there was plans for screws to be coming up saws. We're going to have we're going to get rid of the house robots and just put arena hazards. The arena was going to be like battle bots, but it's like, nah. I'm kind of happy that it ended on a high that it did. I think if we had have went for Series 4 and done it the way we were going to do it, it would have completely spoiled the whole genre.
You wonder, where do we go from here? And well, sometimes it's best to start something.
Well, prime example, here's a great way of explaining it. It's the same thing like with Mike Lambert and Ian Lewis. It's like you've evolved your robot Razor and Danton Kia to the level of you can't upgrade this anymore. It's got to the point where it cannot be upgraded. This is the perfect version of it, and that's the way I see. That's the way I see Antweight Anarchy. It's like Series 3 was the pinnacle. If we had made Series 4, it would have completely destroyed it. So basically, Antweight Anarchy has its moment. The Series 3 went on a high, and I said to myself, right, well, I had made Mecha Mayhem in 2019. It's time to move on to that, and it's time to actually finally get a Northern Irish division over here, because like a lot of people said over the years, like, you've been doing this now for 10 years, but you should do a live event, or you should do, come into more events. But if you have to remember, Antweight Anarchy took 5 years of my time. It took all of my spare time. So I didn't have time to build robots for the live circuits or invest time on doing something. And the thing I'm very passionate about is helping the next generation of people. And the only way I could do that is put all my time into creating a live event over here before I would go over to other events. And the one thing about the robot community, which I have to really specify, and I love them all for it, is all the teams who contributed to help Mecha Mayhem at the very beginning, like yourself, sending over components and shells to the point we've got competitors for it. People, a lot of teams were very, very happy to send over their old Beetle weights for display purposes, because I wanted to. What I do at Mecha Mayhem as well, I do like an educational thing at the end of it. I show like battles. I showed like events such as Bugglebots, and this is the different weight classes, and the focus for Mecha Mayhem at the moment it's Antweights, but we want to also jump to Beetle weights as well and have those two weight classes, because over here.
Of course, Bugglebots was also created around the same time as Antweight Anarchy as a response to Robot Wars' cancellation.
Yeah, that's the wonderful thing. Like we started off with the Antweights, and then literally after that they focused on the Beetle weights, and I really was so happy. It's like we've got two of the biggest shows now created, that one's focused on Beetle weights and one's focused on Antweights, and it's actually showing a whole generation. It's like, yeah, you could build a heavyweight, but it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. But here's the two weight classes, and here's on a showcase of them, and I love what
it goes to show they may be a lot smaller than heavyweights, but that does not mean that they're any less fun to play around with.
Oh God, no! Like that. Like as I say, like a lot. As I say, I've been doing this here for 10 years with Antweights, and I've learned all of my skill set to implement into other machines, like my Beetle weight one shot, like all of my skill set, like driving skill set, weapons assembly, and all that, was thanks to Antweights. The same thing with the featherweights and the heavyweight that I've made now. I owe all of that to my very first Antweight in the form of Rusty.
Yeah, my first ever robot that I built was an Antweight. The first ever spinner that I built was an Antweight as well. Where better to start than something small, which is easy enough components to get. You don't break the bank with it. It's safer to test a small test box, because you can test these big, massive robots in your own back garden very easily, of course.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I love about the Antweight community specifically, is when and the robot community in general. So teams sent me stuff over at the very beginning. We put all of our time and effort. We started off in 2023. We started going to venues that were very kind, and I'm very happy that they give us the time of day, because it's very hard to explain what this is to a place that's never done it before, because I'm doing something completely different to what the regular people over in the UK are doing. It's established over there. It's not
Yeah.
established over here. So I'm like a salesman going like, I wanted to put on an event here for robot combat. What is that? How is that going to work? What way? There's a lot of stuff that I had to learn.
Myself, as well as Ross McKay and Ben Holm as well, we've been thinking about staging our own Antweight event in the northeast of Scotland, and we've been scoping around various venues, trying to pitch this as a sort of sales thing, if you like.
Ross McKay of Team Olitar created the YouTube series Robot Carnage. Here's what he had to tell us.
After I discovered Antweight Anarchy, it made me want to get involved with the sport of robot combat within that weight class. Seeing the Antweights fighting with camera panning and commentary, it encouraged me to make my own show. After the second series of Antweight Anarchy was aired, I began making Hexbug mods with the BattleBots toy line, as well as buying some pre-built robots. I built a simple arena to start the filming of what would become Robot Carnage. The first series went live on YouTube back in 2021, and since then has had 2 more series, 2 spin-off series and a Christmas special. As the show has progressed, there have been a lot less toy modifications and more live event robots being entered into it, as well as a few Classic Wars replicas to appeal to the fans of that era.
Yeah, so it's helped me different skill sets. So you find a venue. We're very, very happy to say that we find a permanent venue in the place called Dragon Scale Card and Gaming in Lisburn. They've been super supportive for the last 3 years. They've helped us out.
It's worth reminding people that when Robot Wars first appeared on the TV, we were, well, Anthony and myself, we were both children and everything.
Yeah.
And what inspired us. And now it's our turn to inspire the next generation of kids who are going to become the next generation of roboteers in, say, 20 years' time. And indeed, this might encourage them to get into engineering and all sorts of other jobs which can improve technology in our daily lives and everything. So there's definitely a good educational element of robot combat as well. And where better to get kids involved in this than right at the start with Antweight class robots in a fun sort of environment.
Oh God, yes, like that's the thing that as I say, like with Antweight Anarchy, that when I got fans come up to me and saying to me like, you've helped me create my first team, and that I was like, that's the goal. And especially with Mecha Mayhem, where we have people coming in, like there's like the best thing about where we're stationed is there's a lot of people coming from different things, like Warhammer, who've went, oh my God, I'd love to do this, and they've went off and created their own machines. We have people coming in that have been Robot Wars fans, and every time a new person comes in, they're like, I thought I was the only one here in Northern Ireland that loved this show. It's a kind of a niche show, and now it's here. It's like, yep, these are the live circuits. This is what you can do. And the best thing about what with Mecha Mayhem is like we're focusing on the Antweights and Beetleweights. Like you have Robo Rads here that focus on featherweights and heavyweights. So it means we have all of the classes sorted. But then the one thing I also want to talk about as well briefly is there's another show that was created as well around the same time as when we started with Mecha Mayhem called Hacker BattleBots, and They're doing something so different. And it's for me as a builder who's been doing this for so long, it's even making me excited to go. I'm building a different weight class I've never had the chance to do. So what Hacker BattleBots does is they're focusing on the 450 gram weight class, or for the US listeners, it is the 1 pounders.
Or in America, they call that 1 pound class the Antweights, just to confuse us.
Yeah. So that's the American Antweight division, where the 150 gram weight class would be their furry division. So the wonderful thing about Hacker BattleBots is they're trying to build teams, which they have. There's been so many good teams that have been created in the space of the 3 years. But I'm hoping that it also shows a lot of the UK teams that go, hey, there's a new weight class. There's more fun to be done with this, and hopefully they'll come over and compete when they start opening up to their events up to the rest of the teams over here in the UK. But it's exciting time. It's exciting time.
Indeed it is. I mean, after all, the Antweight class as we know it today started out as a niche and experimental thing. Compared to other established weight classes. And look at it today. It's been thriving for the last quarter of a century. It's still thriving today. And yeah, I'm hoping that one day we'll be able to get some Antweight events going in Scotland as well.
I really like that's the one thing. Like, I love the fact that Ross and yourself and Liam have all have joined together to do things. But like, what I'd love to see is an advertisement come up and go, "Here's the Scottish Division Antweight thing," because I know I'll be the first one sending in an application form to go into it, because that's the one thing that I love about the community. It doesn't matter where you are. There's the Antweights are everywhere. And that's the one thing I wanted to preface to people is like, I've made so many great contacts. I've met many of my heroes in the robot combat scene through the Antweights. I've made very long lasting friendships, and I know for a fact if I didn't go that message that one time when I seen that Alex Shakespeare was putting up commission bills, and I was like, I seen the post with Craig Danby's Foxic, mini Foxic, and I immediately went to and asked Alex, could I get one? I'll pay anything for it. And the funny thing with Rusty, and that's the bit thing. Like, Rusty has torn mostly around the world at this point. He's been to different events. He's done loads of different things, even to the point that he almost nearly got me caught with with Robot Wars, because fun little story is Robot Wars would give you a contract that if you're a content creator, you can't put any photographs out or record anything until after the show. And you sign this contract, and I signed that contract, and I'm like, great. And at that time, there was a lot of people on Reddit trying to figure out what robots are there. They're in the audience and checking about. So we've stayed mostly by our pet. And Angela Scanlon had come up to talk to us, and she spotted Rusty. And she's like, "Oh my God, this is so cool. It's a mini Foxic." And I was like, "Yeah." And she took a picture of it. I didn't think anything of it.
It's almost as if I heard in Craig Danby's voice when he did a little video of his baby fox going, "We've got a baby Foxic."
Yeah. But the thing that panicked me was literally that night, heading back to the hotel, my phone started to blow up. And I look on Facebook, and there's Rusty online, and people have went, "Oh my God, we've confirmed pushed exits here. The team's there." And it's like, "Our Anthony's there." And I'm like, how did they figure that out? I didn't realize that Angela Scanlon uploaded Rusty to her Instagram to like tease the Robo Wars being filmed, and I'm like, "Oh God!" So I run back to the person I signed the contract with, and I was like, "I didn't do anything. I didn't do." She's like, "No, that's fine. That was Angela. That you haven't broke your contract." But it made me panic.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's to say, like, Rusty, like, it's kind of fun too that anytime Rusty gets a picture, or someone takes a picture of Rusty, they know it's me. They know it's Antweight Anarchy. They know it's Mecha Mayhem, and that's a really great legacy to have, where it's like someone spots Rusty, knows exactly who it is and where it is, and that's my proudest moment too. That when I look at the old episode of Robot Wars and see Rusty on Pushed Eggs, it's like, yeah, this was worth it, and I owe a lot to the Antweight division, and it's great to see it grow. I don't like people who are, I wouldn't say that they're the regular fan, or they're not really a fan, but they're like, "Oh, Robot Combat is dead. It's not thing." It's like, it's so alive with live events. And the one thing I would say to people is, support your local events. That's how you're going to keep Robot Combat alive, because if we all stop today, it's not like Star Wars or Ghostbusters not there. Like, if we all stopped, Robot Combat would die. It would be gone.
Yeah.
It's us. We have this now sounds sappy, but we have a duty to show the next generation, to guide the next generation. The one thing is, never hide your secrets, because you can't take them with you. Give them on to another generation.
And the promoters of these events as well, of course, advertise the heck out of it as well.
Yes. And names out there, like the one that comes to mind is, and give credit where credit's due, he's been in every combat scene, is Dave Weston. Because the one thing that we didn't talk about, we did focus on the main events, is Dave Weston also has made a mini Antweight arena that tours around with extreme robots.
My first ever event of a robot combat of any kind I went to was Extreme Robots in Manchester in April 2018. And after I saw when we had the sort of break between the two main parts of the show, the Antweight arena, which was across the room a bit and everything, that was where Dave Weston was standing, and a bunch of other kids were then playing around with the robots in there. So that's where I got chatting to Dave, and ended up befriending him. And then I thought to myself, this is all a lot of fun and everything, and I think I definitely would like to really get into building this sort of stuff, because I already had my own little Antweight called Fighting Fire I hadn't brought with me. It was a ready-to-run robot built by Harry, who was... it's now called Excitement Park Robotics, but it was until recently called Panoramic Creations. So he was selling commissions as well and everything, and helped with the construction of the first few robots that I made. But yeah, David Weston, he had this little Antweight arena, which was just... a lot of kids would have never seen this weight class before. They'd have been here seeing the big robots, seeing all the heroes and stuff from the revived Robot Wars and stuff, because I remember seeing Eruption was there and stuff. But then you've got this tiny little arena that's just across there, and it's like, ooh, you've got little ones as well. And the kids start playing around with that and everything, and it gives them... This is how you get people interested.
This is what you get people interested. You get future teams that are going to make names for themselves to the point that they're going to be like the aftershock eruptions of robot combat. And that's the other thing we have to owe a lot to Dave West, not only just with Antweights, also in the Beetleweight scene, also in the featherweight scene, in combat, UK combat in general. He is one of the big names that keeps it going, and that's also an inspiration to me. That's why I want to do that for Northern Ireland. Like, I'm going to be a stepping stone. I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm going to be Mr. Robot Wars. You know, it's I know my place in robot combat, and it's just basically I'm helping the next generation guide to robot combat.
Liam Bryant has organised the Very Good Robot Wars stall at the Ferry Fair events in Queensferry for the last 3 years. This is what he has to say about the significance of having Antweights present at the event.
So Antweights have been a big major attraction of my stall that I've been doing for Ferry Fair for the last few years. I think, so basically, as well as the big heavyweights we've had on display and also the demos that we've had from the Beatles and the Feathers, like, the Antweights have been just really good fun for all the kids, because they get to have a shot at driving a robot and finding out what it's like to actually drive a robot. Before they can pester their dad, you know, and say, "Come on, Dad, let's build a robot," you know, can do it at a much more smaller level. And hopefully there'll be some kids that have come back from Ferry Fair saying, "Oh, I want to be an engineer in the future." So yeah, all good fun.
So I'm hoping that some of the rest of us will be able to follow suit and start hosting our own Antweight events and stuff to go along with our Beetleweight ones. So it'll probably just start off as a private gathering between friends first, just so we can test the waters before we then make it a public spectacle. But yeah, it's exciting times in that respect. And well, if you ever do come over to Scotland, or if we ever do meet again at an Antweight event, I hope that you can bring Rusty along so Plucky and Rusty can have a good fight with each other.
Oh, we're definitely going to have a friendly 1v1, definitely. Like, as I say, now that I have a bit more free time, that I'm not primarily, like I say, like Antweight did take a massive chunk of my life. Now that I'm doing Echo Mayhem, it's not not that much pressure. I do have now time to compete, which I am doing now. So I do have lists of places I want to go to. Definitely Battle of the Bears, one I'm definitely wanting to go to at some point. But also Ferry Fair as well. Like I want to go to that as well. But no, as I say, I hope that people enjoyed this, and I hope it also shows light of the history of Antweights. I like the fact that we've all contributed in a way. You know, like we've all had a little place in the history of robot combat, and we still do. We still have many more adventures to do. But as I say, like I want to say a massive thank you for allowing me to be on this podcast, because yeah, it's been nice to go down memory lane and go, I actually did contribute with with Antweights in some shape or form.
It's amazing, isn't it, what gets dug up from the subconscious as we go along and everything. But yeah, that was our not so brief little history of the Antweights. And yeah, if you're still listening to us now at this point, thank you so much for this.
A brief history of the Antweights was brought to you by Mark Smith of Robotics and Anthony Murney of Team Penny, featuring guest contributions from Oliver Steeples, Samuel Grashof, Tom Xiao, David Weston, Ross McKay and Liam Bryant.